Welcome into another Inside the Lines, Inside Carolina, Inside the Lines. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-shirt and Congruity. No, no more Congruity. Sorry about that. Good start, Grace. That's Grace Nugent. It's been a long few weeks covering North Carolina baseball, and they continue to get it done on the field. Of course, last weekend, um, winning their regional. But Grace, the point I wanted to make out of the gate is I think it was good for them to have to play the extra game. And we'll talk with Coach Forbes tomorrow and then the standard media availability. But I don't think you can underestimate the amount of experience and the important experience that these guys are getting, especially guys like Walker McDuffie, Ryan Lynch, and all those going forward in this tournament. That's why the more games you play, yeah, you want to win them all, but there is a silver lining, don't you think?
I think so. And it puts them in a real back against the wall situation. Obviously, they played for an ACC title. And if you don't win that, you don't win the title, but it's not the same. You could go home, your season could be over. And putting these freshmen in this position, I think is just, you can't really put a number on that. You can't really quantify it, that game time experience. And I think another thing that I've noticed, and I know you have too, is across the course of the season, Forbes has just been really intentional, especially with the loss of Maddie, with how he uses his pitchers. And he showed it to us during their loss. I asked him after, I was like, at what point did you decide that you weren't using Walker and Ryan? Because some people see that as capitulation. Okay, we're done. We're going to lose the game. I'm not going to bring these two guys. And that he kind of decided that early. But they had a game where all the pressure wasn't on them to win. Like they're going to still have another shot. And they got to get a lot of guys valuable time and experience, which I think was super important. And obviously, his goal every single time is to win. And he put it on some guys to try to do that. They ultimately couldn't get it done, which I think was more of a free passes and then offensive issue, with the inconsistent situational hitting and then the defensive errors. But he gave these pitchers some really quality innings, especially guys that are older but don't have the experience in a pressure situation like this. And then Ryan and Walker, he's worked really hard, I think, and he talked about this, on lengthening them out across the course of the season so they both can start. He wants Walker in that closer role, but he said that these two guys are starters. But just with how stacked this pitching staff is, at least from a front end guy type of way, he needs to use them in relief. And I mean, for Ryan, he used him in a starter role. And so I just think he's been so like big picture planning in a way that he's setting up his pitching staff so that, hey, we can get to Omaha. And if we do, or if we go to that final game in a regional, we have enough pitching to win it. And I think that was really showcased this weekend. And I think that was really important.
Yeah, and I think the message boards and Twitterverse and all of that stuff. People say a lot of things and fire off a lot of things, but I think for me watching the game, you mentioned Ryan and McDuffie or Lynch and McDuffie not being used. If he had burned one or two of those guys in that Oklahoma game in game two of with Oklahoma and they'd lost and they'd not been available the next day, there would have been folks running around, flame throwing on that. And you've got to make the decisions based on what's ahead of you instead of what's currently there at sometimes in baseball. And to your point, I think all season, if you've listened to these Inside Carolina podcasts with Coach Forbes, he has talked about the preparation from day one to now, for now. Obviously, you want to win during the season. Obviously, you want to do this, but you have to be ready for this time of year. He said on August 19th they met. What's their goal? Omaha. Their goal wasn't the ACC tournament. It wasn't the ACC regular season. No, those are nice, but to be able to manage and coach to this point, I think it's been sort of a master class. And he's not the only coach that does it. All these other teams that are still alive do it as well. But let's sort of look at the piggybacking dynamic that they have. Obviously, Jake Knapp, Jason DeCaro, I think are 1 and 1A, ace wise. But the way he's been able to piggyback them, and it certainly helps that Jake Knapp can go 7, 8, 8.5, or 8 1/3, 8 2/3 innings a game. If he does that every game out, then it makes it simple. But your thoughts on that dynamic all through the season, especially here in the postseason?
I mean, Jake has talked about it so many times. His goal is to pitch as much as possible to alleviate the pressure on the bullpen, not just for whatever game he's pitching in, which, as we know, with his beautiful, I believe it's a 13-0 or 14-0 record. I haven't lost one. But he wants to alleviate it going forward for the weekend. And I think what's such a luxury with him is, as it was shown on Friday against Holy Cross, you had Walker come in for what, like 8 pitches or something like that? Basically nothing. And so you only have a few guys see your closer, and it just rounds out the game really well. And then you have the ability to use him Friday, Saturday if you need him, Sunday if you need him, Monday if you need him, like that, because he's only pitched so little. It kind of reminds me of Dalton last year, where I think there was like a stretch where he pitched every single game. Even if it was 3 innings, if it was 2 innings, if it was like 2 batters, I think that could happen with Walker. And they have other options if the game is, like a 14-0 victory. You might not need to put Walker in. You maybe can go to someone else. But I think the piggybacking works really well, but it started to get me to think, watching that final game, is Ryan going to be the third starter? Could he be number 3? Could that be an option? Could you move Aiden to the bullpen and have him come out of the pen? He's done it before. You could have him go after Jason. You could have him go after Ryan and bring more of an experienced arm to that spot and put Ryan in a starting situation, which he's shown he can deal with. He can also deal with getting into jams in a starter situation like Clemson. But the thing that's unique about what we have coming up is, obviously, the first thing is the Super. You have to win the Super to make it anywhere else. And the Super is, you only have to win 2 games. They have 2 really, really good starters. As good as Arizona's offense can be, it's going to be really hard to pull out 2 wins against Jake Knapp or Jason DeCaro. It's going to be hard to pull out 1 win against those 2. So the question now becomes, if you have 2 games, even if you have 3 games, it's like a weekend series. So I think it's almost less gamesmanship in the fact that if he wants to go all in on that second game, all in on the victory, if that chance happens, he could totally do that. And you could see just like a stack of some of the most dominant pitchers from that staff. But I just think Forbes has done a master class of pitching and just using his starting pitching, his relieving pitching, these freshmen, what situations he puts them in, especially with the loss of older guys like Kyle and Maddie. I think he's done such a good job this season. I think it's one of those things that when you watch a game every day, it's not going to pop out to you. But when you look at it from the back end, it really shows. And I think part of that comes from him being a pitching coach for so long. But I think we're about to see that back in action this weekend.
Yeah, Carolina, of course, opens on Friday at noon, Saturday at noon, and then Sunday, if necessary, is to be determined. I'm going to jump in with a question from Preston. Preston's a hardcore Inside Carolina person, and we'll sort of bang through these questions as we go through this scouting report / preview. Do y'all think noon start is an advantage versus a West Coast team or not really? I don't think it matters. It's not like old guys out there playing and get jet lagged or whatever and time change. And if you look at Cal, Grace, what did Cal do in the ACC tournament? I mean, we had breakfast baseball with Cal.
They were playing at 6 a.m. their time, and I think like 9 or 10 for the ACC tournament, and they went boom, boom, 2 wins. No one thought Cal was going to do it. Cal was bottom of the ACC. So you never really know. And I also think, to take into consideration looking at the weather, making me wonder why I decided to move to a state that it rains a lot. It's supposed to rain like all of next week and this weekend. That's unhelpful. That's really annoying. So I think one of the reasons, and I know I was talking with friends, like, why do we have 2 noon starts? Like, that's probably the most annoying thing. My friends that want to come to the game, that like live in Charlotte, are like, what am I going to do? Get up at 7 in the morning and drive to try to stand in the student ticket line? I'm going to try to convince them to do that. But I said, I think weather is going to have a big impact, which might be a reason that they do have the 2 noon games. So I would take that into consideration. If you're coming to the Bosch, please check the weather. Maybe bring a rain jacket, an umbrella, a good attitude, mimosa or 2, since it's in the morning. Just think about it. Ponder.
I already got it planned out, but yeah, I mean, if you look at Friday of the regional, why do you want the early game? Well, there it is. Oklahoma, Nebraska, I think finished up after midnight on Saturday. So Carolina and Arizona will play at noon. I don't think it affects Zona at all, but anyway, good question, Preston. A lot of people have asked it, but yeah, just look at Cal and their success playing at 6 a.m. their time in the ACC tournament. Looking ahead a little bit, and we can really talk about the pitching staff forever, and we can get back more into it. But I'm kind of like Coach Forbes talking about you don't talk about a no hitter, but Gavin Gallagher. I mean, the dude has been on fire, and that is an understatement with what he's been able to do. The cool thing about Carolina baseball's social media team has just been wearing it out with Gallagher stuff. But Grace, I mean, about 722 in a regional. I do not know. And I wanted to ask Skip Johnson for Oklahoma about pitching to Gavin, but he wasn't in the mood, to maybe address that question. But your thoughts here on Gallagher's performance? He did it last year in the regional and did not have a good super regional. So there's that. But anyway, Gallagher in fuego.
I mean, yeah, I remember I think we were watching it at one point and I was thinking the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over with a repeated effect. Obviously, that doesn't really apply to baseball, but I was like, Skip, what are you doing? Just intentionally walk him. 4-pitch walk, just pitch around him. I don't know why you're letting this guy beat you every single time, but Skip did not do that, and Skip ended up losing. So, but Gavin went. I remember last year after his he didn't even play when he hit the grand slam against LIU. That was obviously huge. That was the gala, as they branded it, the gala hymn moment. And then against LSU, he didn't even do particularly that well. He was actually, I think his defense was the biggest part of that because I remember all of the balls that Tommy Tanks hit to him at third. And I was like, he just grabbed some of those 105 off the bat line drives from him. It's like this kid is gonna live in Tommy's nightmares. But I mean, this regional, it seems like every single time he came up to bat, I couldn't have been more impressed. And then he hit like a homer or like a double to the gap or his first career triple, and you're like, wow, what can this kid not do? I mean, his full line, like you said, was 13 of 18, 722, 3 homers, his first career triple, 3 doubles, 10 RBIs. I believe I wrote it in my story that I did about him. I don't know if you can maybe look this up while I'm talking, but I believe his slash line, his slugging percentage might have been over. It was either 1,500 or like 2,000. It was something insane for the weekend because of all the
I think
homers.
I think it was 1,500.
Yes,
It's
it was.
ridiculous.
I remember trying to calculate it, getting up like slugging percentage calculator. And then I did the math, 27 total bases. That means for every out in a single game, he got a base, basically, if you want to do that. It was back-to-back most outstanding player in the press box with the big guns, Pat James, texting all of the SID groups who are trying to figure out if that has ever happened in Carolina history for someone to get back-to-back most outstanding players in a regional. I think they've determined it hasn't been found, but for safety's sake, since 1999, I don't know when they started giving out the most outstanding player. And what's crazy is he didn't even hit 300 on the season until after the first Holy Cross game. That's what's insane. The fact that this kid who was so good last year, especially down the stretch, but he just it started really low. It started to get back up. He told us about some adjustments he made with Coach Weirs. I think it was like Duke, Pitt, Wake. He did really well. It all kind of started with, I think he hit 2 homers at Elon, and he had 5 homers in his first like 106 at bats. And then he's just gone off since then. But the fact that he still didn't hit 300 until the first Holy Cross game, and I think now he's hitting like 323 and he has all of these insane stats, is crazy. Now, like you said, he did not really show up in the regionals or the supers last year. Now, not many people did show up against Derek Clark when he had 144 pitches and 100 of them were strikes. Like that game, those games were very different than the regionals in the fact that they just relied so heavily on like, okay, Vance Honeycutt is going to hit 2 homers to the very same spot in back-to-back days. They were very low scoring. It was more this like hard nose pitching. the offense, even UNC's offense, who is a lot more explosive than it is this year, didn't have that much success because those are just the two teams that were playing. And now they meet another Big 12 team. And who knows if it's going to be the same? I don't think it is, because that's just not really the identity of this Arizona team. But I am really interested to see what Gavin does going forward, especially, and we've talked about him being pitched a little bit differently this year, just based on, his acclaim. And I'm interested to see if that transitions to when they play Arizona, because I remember last year we were talking to West Virginia's head coach, Randy Mazey, in his last season. And I think it was the last game, and Casey was 4 for 5 or something like that. So he said it in the postgame press conference, we wanted to pitch to Vance and not pitch to Casey. So they pitched to Vance, and Vance hit a homer over the fence. And it's the same idea with Gavin now. Are guys going to pitch to him? Are they not going to pitch to him? And then it brings into question, and I'm really excited to see how this one goes, is Luke. Luke, since the FSU game in the ACC tournament, has only had one hit. He and Gavin are hitting right next to each other. Is it going to be one of those things where someone doesn't want to pitch to Gavin, so they end up pitching to Luke, and then they regret that? That'll be very interesting to see. I think he is due. He is a draft-eligible sophomore. This will be his last time. No matter what happens, it'll be his last time playing in Boshamer Stadium. He's the number 20 prospect in the country. I don't foresee him coming back. So I'm wondering if some of that is going to kick in. And I think the Kane, Luke, Gavin, and Jackson, all of those guys at the top of the lineup, especially the Jackson and Luke, who this is their last go around here. I'm really excited to see what the top of this lineup can do, especially with Gavin's recent fireworks, if that's going to change how West Virginia pitches to him, hence pitches to the others, which is very nerdy and niche, but that's what I've been pondering today.
No, I think it's very important. And this is another one of those things where people are talking about maybe tinkering with the lineup. Luke Stevenson's not hitting well, moving back in the lineup or whatever. The thing is that when you have Galla-heater behind you, you're going to see pitches, especially when you're third. You're batting third, you get the first 2 outs in an inning. You get Kepley out, you get Vanderbeek out, and you got Stevenson up. You're not going to pitch around Stevenson, because if you do and he gets on base, you've got Galla-heater coming up in the first inning. And the same thing, and you didn't go that far down the lineup, but Hunter Stokely has been a guy behind Gavin Galla-heater that forces them to pitch to Galla-heter. Carolina's got this lineup set up, I think, as ideally as you can, especially if you're going to have Sam Angelo start hitting and start doing what he's doing. So you've got a dangerous lineup, but it's not always who's having a great stretch. It's about who's behind them or who's in front of them that prevents you from pitching around guys. And I don't think you can do that. And Carter French had, 3 hits? There was some Carter French slander on the message board.
I think he was 5 for 15 on the weekend.
Yeah. And 3 of those were right after the Carter French slander about the bunt.
Exactly. And he's gotten down every bunt besides that one. And obviously, I mean, we know in the postseason, bunting is big. And also, Alex Madera's down in that lineup. He has one of the highest batting average on the team. You want to pitch around him? We talked about this, I think, at the middle of the season, that I had said, I think one of their offensive problems is teams don't have people that they really have to learn to pitch around. It's maybe 1 or 2 guys. It's maybe just Luke, when Gavin wasn't hitting well. And even when Hunter was hitting well, half the time there was no one on base. It was maybe just Kane if they got that far down the lineup. But now that this offense has just kind of clicked together, and I feel like we always knew the pitching was strong. The pitching has almost always been strong. There are a few instances, specifically when Aiden starts for some reason, that the pitching doesn't always the offense doesn't always catch up. But the pitching has always been strong. And now it seems like the offense is kind of rising to meet that. And Skip Johnson said it. I was just listening to Darren Vaught, Danny Graves, and Bradley Smart on ACC Baseball, etc. They were talking about it. This team, and you and I have talked about it extensively, when this team plays their best, when the offense is like we say, there's no one you can really pitch around. It's the next guy up. The next guy is going to get you if you don't get on. Next guy is going to hit you in. If they do that, and the pitching is just as locked down as we've seen it, as electric as we've seen it, they are a scary team. And there's maybe only a handful of teams in the country when this team plays the best that I think can beat them. but they're going to have to do that. They need to perform. And as many people have talked about Omaha, this might be their national championship year, stuff like that. They have to get through West Virginia first. And so that's what's most important. I know that's what the coaching staff's going to have them blinders on for, but they're going to need to win at least, they got to win 2 out of 3. You only got to win 2 out of 3 to win a super to go to Omaha. So that's what's on the docket for them next.
Yeah, you said get through West Virginia.
Oh, I mean Arizona.
You're gonna get some. I know there's an Oregon State fan in the chat, so no telling. Might be some Arizona folks out there as well. We're talking. This is Inside the Lines. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Grace Nugent. Shout out to the 120 plus folks that are here on the live chat. Baseball in Chapel Hill has grown, and we've been there to cover it since day one. And so appreciate everybody chiming in and getting in. Get your questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer them. Looking at this, we talk about the lineup, and I mentioned Sam Angelo. I mean, he's been solid. That DH has still been a little bit of a rotation matchup base, but Angelo has shown he's the way. We've talked about Kane Kepley. But I want to go back to one comment you made, and I want to bring it up. You mentioned Casey Cook. We had a debate in the parking lot about, is this team better than last year?
You want to have this debate right now?
We're not going to have this debate here. We're going to leave that up to the people in the chat. Is this team better than last year's team? I say that it's a lot closer, if not yes, than people want to think. What saith the chat when you look at it?
Hold on.
As you can see, Miss Nugent wants to have this debate now.
No. I want to be fully prepared so I can beat you and whatever with all of my stats. But my question is to clarify, are you talking about overall team? Are you talking about more effective team? Or are you talking about specifically the lineup? Because I think it's really easy to say, no offense to any of our pitchers from last season. The pitching, this staff who's currently healthy, all of the guys that are currently healthy in this staff, I think are better than last year's staff. Now, I did, in fact, make a dream list of guys from last year and this year that I would have liked to play together, and I think it would have won the national title. Not to, but I think that could have happened, which is neither here nor there. That's hypothetical, and I can't go too far into that route. But are you clarifying overall team or are you clarifying lineup? Because we had a certain debate that was basically on the lineup.
I think overall team. But in fairness, I will include how the debate started. The debate started, and I love Bobby, but the debate started with Honeycutt versus Kepley. That's another debate. And I got a lot of pushback from the person to my left on the screen, on your screen, about that. But I'm not so sure the stats don't bear out some positives for me. Anyway, let's move on. We've got plenty of time to debate this. This team is in a super regional Friday against Arizona at noon. Where do you want to go from here? I mean, let's talk a little bit about Arizona. Arizona sort of gets lost in the Big 12. They go and they play in the Eugene regional. They come out of that. They beat Cal Poly twice and Utah Valley once. And in fairness, and I've watched a ton of baseball, I'd never heard of Utah Valley. And they were impressive watching them. But Grace, just sort of an overview before we dig into Arizona fully here. Tell people about the Wildcats.
Yeah, I think they're kind of one of those teams that you just are like, oh, I forgot they're in the Big 12. I forgot they play baseball. They're just kind of there. What's ironic is last year UNC was matched up with the Tucson Regional, which Arizona did not make it out of. Obviously, West Virginia made it out of it. And this year, Chapel Hill matched up again with a chance to play the Wildcats, and it actually happened. I talked to a few people who have actually seen them play in person because, highlights and stats can only do so much for me. And I think more of their bread and butter is going to be their offense. I can go through a little bit of the numbers that I have as of recently, but something interesting that I did find is in 2023, the Tar Heels were swept at home by Boston College in what would have been the low point of their season. And I remember Matt Horvath had to call a players meeting to talk about the season and then decide, okay, we want to do this. And the UNC was risk of not even making the ACC tournament, and then they had to go to Terre Haute, Indiana, the whole thing we know. Well, from that 2023 Boston College team, Julian Taghini, who's a relief pitcher for Arizona now, and Arizona's catcher, Adonis Guzman, and the pitching coach, Kevin Vance, were all on that 2023 Boston College team that was a coach that went to Chapel Hill and swept that series. I found that nugget. I just thought was interesting. I remember watching that Boston College series. It's one of those things where you just want to like claw your eyeballs out. It's just terrible baseball to watch. It was bad. So I found that interesting. Their head coach is Chip Hale. He's in his 4th year. He was previously the third base coach for the Detroit Tigers, which I found interesting because I feel like you don't normally get a ton of ex-MLB assistant coaches that go down to coach college. It's normally college. So I wonder if that's going to come out in how he manages / coaches his players. I know that Forbes is very much on the, not to say Hale isn't, I haven't interacted with him at all, but is very much on the, I'm coaching you, you're still being coachable because you're young men and we need to make you into better players and better people. And as we've seen, that's worked out very well for them. But an overview of their season, they were 39-18, 23-12 in conference play. I believe their RPI was 29, strength of schedule was 61. They beat TCU. I did watch this game today. Beat TCU in 10 innings to win the Big 12 title. It was only a 2-1 game in Arlington. So they've figured out how to win the tight games, it seems, in those situations. And then, in Eugene, they went as the number 2 seed. They beat Cal Poly twice, who was probably one of the best 3 seeds in the country. I'm trying to think who else would be on that list. Maybe Kentucky, who I believe was a 3 seed. But Cal Poly was definitely one of the best 3 seeds in the country. They had the best rotation and the best defense in that regional, and they beat them twice. Obviously, the Eugene regional was hosted by Oregon, who didn't make it to the regional final either. And they lost to Utah Valley and Cal Poly. So Arizona didn't even have to play the host for that. But they beat Cal Poly they only needed 3 games. They beat Cal Poly 3-2, then Utah Valley 14-4, where they hit 8 homers, and then Cal Poly 14-4, where they hit 6 homers. So as of recently, they have 13 straight games with a homer. This is going to bring me into what I'm saying. And they hit 15 homers in the Eugene Regional, which is a program record. However, at home, in 30 games at home at High Corbett Field, they only 36 home runs were hit, 27 for the Wildcats and 9 for opponents, and they were hit in 30 contests. But when they leave home, because that is a pretty big park, they've found a lot of success. I read that their Hale stresses the hard and low on the hitting approach. It seems to pay off. So I think, especially as of recently, and when we get into the hitters, I can kind of say why. And with these numbers, this team relies on that explosive long ball. You're going to hit with men on, and specifically, they're going to hit the long ball with men on when they're not apparently at home. And they hit some in Globe Life, and that is a really Cavaliers field. That's an MLB ballpark. Home of the Texas Rangers. Wanted to bring that up. So I think that dynamic just plays a different style of offense to UNC, and that'll be very interesting to watch. But I think that'll be the biggest part of what they come to Chapel Hill with, more of their identity. Now, obviously, I don't think any of the pitchers that they saw in Eugene, especially because the best pitcher in that Eugene regional played for Oregon, are the same caliber as Jason DeCaro and Jake Knapp, who we know are the 2 people that are guaranteed to get starts. So obviously take everything we say with a grain of salt. And I don't really think, has UNC played a Big 12 team this year? I don't think they have. No, Kansas State. They did play Kansas State. And
Where's
then
Texas Tech now?
Oh, Texas Tech, also Big 12. My bad. So those were like, 4 of their first 10 games? 5 games? So it's been a long time since they've played a Big 12 team. And I think that each conference has a little bit of a different identity when it comes to playing baseball. Obviously, each team does. Kentucky is very different than the rest of the SEC. Louisville is a little bit different to the rest of the ACC, stuff like that. But I think it will just be really interesting to get another conference in here, and maybe it will end up a little bit like that West Virginia one last year.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at Arizona's record. They played some exhibition games in the fall, played Ole Miss, lost to Clemson, played Louisville, lost to Louisville badly early. They played against San Diego, which San Diego has it.
That early Louisville team, though, they beat Texas. They rattled off some big victories, and now they're in the supers. So, you know.
Yeah, so they have certainly played. They beat Texas A&M, beat Mississippi State, lost to Tennessee. They've played a lot of ball games against quality teams in Arizona. And to your point, and everybody in the chat. And Waterholt, we got you. You don't have to ask the question but once. I star all the good questions that we'll get to. So we'll talk about that very question. But let's talk a little bit about Arizona's pitching staff because that's what everybody asks about. We can talk about the hitters and we'll do that. But the pitching staff, because this is where I think the difference may be in this regional, a significant difference, and that's the pitching staffs. What saith you about what Zona brings to Chapel Hill?
Well, I'm thinking this one was a little bit harder to find more of the research that I want on it because I think it's harder to equalize pitchers across a whole landscape. But I've heard from quality source that it is a 99% chance that they will be starting on Friday. Owen Kremakowski. I want to say I'm saying that right. I'm unsure. Apologies, Owen. Don't think you're listening, but if you are, that's the name. He's got a 4.73 ERA, 135 WHIP, 9.25 record, 85 innings pitched, 82 strikeouts, 15 balls, 4% walk rate, really big. I think walk rate is one of the most underrated stats in baseball, at least for pitchers, as we saw on Sunday for the Tar Heels. Walks can kill you, especially for a starting pitcher. So that's really big. And then in the Eugene regional, they went Karamakowski, Rawl, Graziar, and then Smith Bailey. I think Smith is the only other one that is like qualified if we want to do that, at least when you go look on their stats. He has a 3.97 ERA, 139 WHIP, 3 and 3, 77 innings pitched, 72 strikeouts, and then 27 walks. So more walks, pretty much almost equivalent strikeouts to kind of an innings 1-to-1. Same with Karamakowski. But their arms don't at least their starting arms don't wow me. UNC just faced arguably what was one of the best starters, and we saw how that went. 6 runs in the first inning, 9 runs total in his worst college outing statistically ever. And they also faced Jamie Arnold. So this team has faced the 2 best pitchers, respectively, on the right and left sides, which I think is big. But I think the biggest thing for them is their bullpen. They had the best bullpen in Eugene. Tony Pluta, who's 2-0 with a 144 ERA and 12 saves, was the best reliever in the Big 12. He has a 4.3 walk rate. He's a Stopper of the Year finalist. He's done a lot of heavy lifting. And then Casey Hintz, I'm very excited to see because he was a submariner. Who doesn't love a good submarine pitcher? Please find me one. I love watching submarine pitchers. Like the fact that just the arm slots go all the different ways, so interesting to watch. Like even Kyson Witherspoon. I was talking to Pat and I was like, where is his arm slot? So we looked at his arm slot. We'll be very excited to watch this guy pitch. I don't think it's really a pitcher that UNC has seen a lot. I don't remember if they saw Modstadt again of Clemson. I don't think they did. That's the only other submarine pitcher that I can think off the top of my head. And he can go multiple innings. They've used him as a multiple inning guy, kind of like a Walker McDuffie. And their entire right now starting lineup seems to be right-handed, and most of their relief pitchers, which we saw that the soft-tossing, funky lefty can really mess up UNC, as can a lot of them. But also against the high-quality, high-velo lefties, UNC can do well, i.e. Jamie Arnold, Wes Mendez, Joey Bellini. So I don't really think that this rotation or this hitting staff might have a problem with those, but you also have Garrett Hicks and Hunter Alberini, and then the aforementioned previous Boston College Chonagini, which they're all right-handed, and they do a lot of the other lifting in the bullpen. So I don't think it's going to be like the starter is going to go 8 innings and pitch 109 pitches like Jake Knapp or 144 like Derek Clark, who I love to bring up in whatever instance possible. I think it'll be more of okay, he's going about 5 innings, then we're handing it over to 2 or 3 bullpen arms to get the rest of it done.
Never seen a West Virginia pitcher get more mentions in a Carolina baseball pod or in a
It
Carolina
was
baseball press
awesome.
conference.
It's so impressive. Like, can we just take a minute and say 144 pitches and like 104 of them were strikes? At that point, I don't think there was almost a single Carolina pitcher in the last few weeks that had thrown over 100 pitches. Obviously, very different on this staff. Jake Knapp has done it like I think 8 or 9 consecutive times, and like 11 out of his 15 outings or whatever he's at, a ton. Even Jason's gotten up there, Aiden's gotten up there, but at that point, 144 pitches, that's insane. It's like Nolan Ryan mentality was what Forbes said. So I just think he needs to be mentioned as much as humanly possible, and I'm going to do it. So
for him as a story about why guys go to pros early, and take the information with a grain of salt. He gets drafted. Then this is Clark from West Virginia last year. He gets drafted, and they lowball him and pay him like $1,000 as a signing bonus because he had no leverage. That's why guys go early when you have leverage. If you're ever wondering why somebody would leave school early to go pro baseball, there you go. That's a big reason for it. Grace, when we look at it, you mentioned, and I think this is important, the right-handed pitching aspect. Carolina, other than Oklahoma's closer, Carolina has hammered right-handed pitching this year, and Forbes will point out multiple times that they've seen all the lefties across the way, and of course you mentioned Jamie Arnold. They took it to him as well, but right-handed pitchers for Arizona, if they throw lefties, it's going to be a surprise. I'm sure it's coming, but we'll see. I think that is a big deal, and that is something that. It's one of those $64,000 baseball questions is why do soft-tossing lefties have so much success, but a soft-tossing righty will get pounded? It is interesting to me. It's one of those baseball questions.
That one is so interesting too, because I don't think it's every single soft-tossing lefty. I think you got to have a little bit of funk. Shea showed that perfectly.
Right.
I mean, you got to have, if you don't have the speed, if you're a lefty, you still have to have a little bit of special stuff, a little bit of spice somewhere. But UNC has either got to hope that they're not seeing a soft tossing lefty, or they're just getting him out of the game, because they can hit them, just not that much, which is almost wild to me that they can hit Jamie Arnold, who is widely regarded. He's a fantastic pitch mix. So does Vellini and Mendez. And obviously Mendez dealt a little bit more, but that game was still very close. And they can hit those. They can hit the 98 mile per hour. We know this team can hit a fastball. We know that for sure. They can hit a cutter. They can hit a slider, especially from right-handed hitters, and especially if it's fast. But then you see a soft tossing lefty, and it's like, you're like, that was a fastball right down the middle, and you didn't hit it. What are you doing? So obviously hitting is hard. We know that. Can't do it. But I think this many right-handers will serve them well, just because I think they have a little bit more margins for error if the right-hander doesn't have total velocity.
You brought it up. I did not bring it up. Your hitting prowess. Maybe one day that video will surface on one of these shows. You don't have to talk about it. This inside jokes that we have here, folks. But there are people
at Inside Carolina.
Yeah. Anyway, looking ahead, we're talking with Grace Nugent. I'm Tommy Ashley. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. Go see them on Franklin Street when you're in town for Boshamer or the games at Boshamer, and get your Carolina swag via the Inside Carolina discount there, 10% off your order. They've got the baseball jerseys, and they've got the good baseball jerseys. I haven't seen the ones I do not like, but to Carolina's credit, they've won several games in what I consider their ugliest jerseys out there. So maybe they're moving up on the list. But Johnny T-shirt can outfit you with everything you need in that regards as far as Carolina swag. Grace, hitting. Mention Arizona. They will hit home runs outside of their own park because their park is a dead zone. But they treat every other park, it seems like, as a bandbox. Just sort of run through Arizona's lineup here, because I think this is where Knapp and, to a lesser extent, Jason DeCaro, because Jason will give up more hard hit balls than Knapp. But Carolina's pitching is going to have to be solid here, or you risk getting into those slugfests, high scoring little league score type games. But Arizona's hitting, Grace.
Well, to that point with Knapp and Jason, Well, I've said it before. I think the thing that will force them out of games is pitch count. And that kind of disrupts the whole rotation thing because UNC relies on their starting pitchers, those two specifically, to go deep into games so they don't have to go to that bullpen as early because they have the really talented bullpen arms, but I don't think they always have the breadth of bullpen arms to bring in really tight situations. So they count on that. Again, super is a little bit different than a regional. You only got to win 2. So that might help them a little bit. I will go through what I think the lineup will probably be. If there's a few little, this guy's going to hit 2 instead of 3, please, this is an estimate based on their last 2 games. And also, sorry if I'm butchering these names. I know I'm getting the first one right. I'll talk about him in a minute. Brendan Summerhill, and then we have Aaron Walton, Mason White, Adonis Guzman, Maddox McAllis, what a cool name, Garen Caulfield, Andrew Kane, Tommy Spillane, and then Easton Brayfogie. I think those are pronounced somewhat close. If they're not, I'm so sorry. I apologize to you. Never been amazing at pronouncing names I don't know. But Summerhill, I saw him play on the Cape. He's the number 19 prospect via MLB Pipeline. Just to put in perspective, Luke is number 20, and he's UNC's highest prospect. He lost 25 games due to injury this year, so he's not even qualified batter on their stats. But right now, he's slashing 370, 492, 610 with 35 walks, which is pretty big. He'll get on base. His scouting grades are 55 in literally every single category. So he's a pretty well-rounded player. He had an all-star performance in the Cape, but then he had a broken hand and a pulled hamstring. So the thing that's really set this guy back is the injuries. He's probably going to be the version of JJ Weatherholt from last year that UNC did get a really high draft prospect. Obviously, he's not as high as Weatherholt, but Weatherholt actually didn't do anything. He's a lefty with a good walk to strikeout ratio, and he's beginning to tap into some of that raw power, mainly on the pull side. He has a 403 batting average on balls in play, which is on the higher end of BABIP if you're indoctrinated into the world of baseball stats. Sam Angelo had a terrible BABIP, to put that into perspective. Like line drive to everyone, if you're hitting it right to the outfielder, that's obviously going to give you a bad one, even if it's really hard hit. His is a lot higher. He was fun to watch in the Cape where they hit with wood bats. He was still able to get a lot of hits in. I did watch him run into the fence during the All-Star game and get taken off in an ambulance. He was okay, though. No one worry. He's back. That might have been one of the injuries. Couldn't tell you for sure. They also have Mason White, who's really just went like kablam as of recently. He's a big power hitter. He's leading the team in OPS. He's been going off since the Big 12 tournament. He's been known to be streaky, but I think he's on one of the good sides of the streak right now. He hit 3 homers at really large Globe Life Field during the tournament. He's 336, 419, 714 with 19 home runs and 70 RBIs. He leads both of those categories. Last weekend, he did really well as well. He's been on this heater. He has a 377 BABIP and then 153 weighted runs created, which is the highest on that team. Another really nerdy stat. Look it up if you want to know exactly how they calculated it. But then in May alone, he was hitting 446 with 10 homers, 26 RBIs, 64 total bases, and a 1672 OPS. So when I say heater, that's what I mean. Those are probably the 2 guys that I think they're going to hit first and third. Those are the 2 guys that I would watch out for the most, especially Mason White, just because, the hitting is contagious. He's like their version of Gavin ish. Obviously, Gavin had just such an explosive weekend. Mason's is just stretched out over a longer period of time. And then Aaron Walton, he's also above 300. He has 14 homers, 48 RBIs, 22 hit by pitches. So, Kane, you got another guy who's trying to rival you in hit by pitch count in the Chapel Hill Super Regional. And then Adonis Guzman has also been big for them behind the plate. Again, he came from Boston College, so he has a little bit of that experience playing in the ACC, playing against a UNC team. I'm trying to think if there's anyone. I guess Hunter Stokely was there. Jackson was there. I'm trying to think of guys that were on that 2023 team that experienced that terrible, terrible weekend. But Summerhill and White are the biggest names to watch out for. White, which is how he's been hitting, and then Summerhill because he does have the pedigree and he has the ability to make a big impact, even if injuries have hindered him along the way. I believe it was D1 who was saying that if Summerhill was, obviously not everything goes to one player, but if Summerhill was healthy for the big season, the Wildcats would definitely maybe have been able to win some of those smaller margin games and make a run at a 1 seed to host a regional. Obviously, that did not happen, but those are the two guys that I would watch out for.
It's interesting. You talked about that Boston College deal in 23. Boston College this year is what they all universally say turned it around this year as well, the team meeting. Just while you were talking, I was looking at all the stats you had, but I also was looking at Warren Nolan, who I love going to Warren Nolan baseball. If you go to the Arizona version, they predict Arizona will win the series against North Carolina. If I can find it.
When was this prediction made?
I don't know. He predicts, they have the predicted wins or whatever. He's got Arizona winning the series 2-1. But if you go to Carolina, click through the Carolina link, Carolina wins the series 2-1. So take what you guys have seen elsewhere with a grain of salt and listen to what you got here at Inside Carolina and also folks that cover this stuff hardcorely. Question in the chat, is Kane hurt? That would be news to us. Kane is as smooth as ever. He did take a hit with Jackson Vanderbrake, but I think he came back fine, and that was several days ago. Grace, looking at your list, you've gone through the hittings, you've gone through the lineups. We know how they got here and how Arizona got here. What's your take on how this all goes down? We didn't do predictions last time. We're not going to do predictions specifically, but I think for me, it ultimately comes down to Jake Knapp and Jason DeCaro. And I falsely said that DeCaro had given up more home runs than Jake. They've both given up 6 on the year. Aiden Hout with 11, I think. But anyway, how does this all shake out?
Oh, wait, I didn't know that. This is big for those two. I think that, yes, it comes down to those pitchers. I do not think that Arizona, again, I said it, I think Cal Poly have the best rotation in that Eugene regional, but I don't think Arizona has faced the quality of arms that are Jake Knapp and Jason DeCaro. Forbes talks about it all the time. He has 2 aces. Yes, he does. And then he has 3 guys that he has started or wants to start that may come out of that bullpen. So I just don't think they're going to have the same offensive success. Obviously, we've seen Jason and Jake have both given up homers, but that's only 6 on the year. And how many innings have they pitched? A lot. Jake led the ACC in regular season innings pitched, and Jason wasn't far behind him. So these are not pitchers that give up the long ball a lot. They will give up some solo shots now and then because, as we say, and I think Jason gave up a pretty big bomb in Louisville, but that was not one of his better outings. As we say, good pitchers will give up solo homers because they're not afraid to hammer the strike zone. When you start getting into trouble is when they're afraid to go to that strike zone and then they start walking guys. But I just don't think that this Arizona lineup is necessarily ready or has seen the caliber of these arms. And not just that, but Jake didn't even pitch that well against Holy Cross. When you look at it, when you look at some of his other outings against better teams than Holy Cross, but he still found a way to get it done. And that is something that Jake Knapp does. We even saw him run down to the bullpen for that final Oklahoma game. I think if that game was close, Forbes would have had to physically try to hold him back for going on the field and closing it out. Because that's what he does. He finds a way to get it done for his team. And so I think even if he doesn't have either his normal velocity, his normal command, he will try to find a way to get it done. And the same thing with Jason. He's worked really hard thus far this year on just the mental aspect of pitching with runners on, because he will walk a few more guys. He will get hit a little bit more, but he's done really well at being able to get out of those situations and deal with traffic on the base paths. I think Florida State was the best example of that. 7 hits, only 1 run scored. That was big. And so I think with those 2 guys, it's just going to be harder for Arizona to find the success, especially with the long ball that they are used to. So I think that's a big thing. And then on the flip side, this offense, the UNC one, they just need to hit. They need situational hitting. They need to do what they did on Friday, Saturday, and Monday, especially that Saturday and Monday. I mean, they hammered Oklahoma. So if they're able to do that, they're able to hit situationally anywhere from that 400 to 500 range with runners on, and they're able to play clean baseball. Clean baseball. As Forbes said, up to the pitching, and it's up to the defense. The better team that does those two things is going to win the game, and I think that is true in the Super.
Yeah, and I said this the other day when we were sitting there, when Carolina plays clean baseball with no errors and minimal walks, they win. I mean, they just have enough. It's when they start throwing it around or booting it around and they get with the free passes, pass balls, wild pitches, and things like that. So that'll be the key for me. Somebody in the chat said, you know, 0-2 hitting or 2-out hitting. Carolina scored 22, I believe 22 of the 34 this past weekend with 2 outs is crazy. And that's the thing that has gotten Carolina in trouble at times. Not necessarily Knapp, sometimes DeCaro, but you get those first 2 outs and then you walk somebody and then you get traffic on the bases. So that'll be something they need to keep certainly quiet. Let's go through these questions a little bit. Walter Holt, you've patiently waited. Can we take a moment to appreciate guys like Vanderbrate, Stokely, and how much they've improved at the plate? Both could have transferred after contributing in 23 and then playing very little in 24. Grace, to that point, Vanderbrake obviously had a good 23 his first year at Carolina. 24 was not good, but he came up big. He turned it around in the College World Series, and then he's been that clutch guy. I mean, he's the guy that's been clutch. And then Stokely didn't play last year because he stayed hurt. And I think as much as good, and this was a part of our debate about last year's team versus this year's team, Parks Harbor versus Hunter Stokely. I mean, I think Stokely, and I mentioned it earlier, being the guy behind Gallagher, has gotten Gallagher good pitches to hit, and that matters. But your take on these two guys, vets, old guys, seem like they've been around forever, being a big part of why this team gets it done in clutch moments, Grace.
Yeah, I think it was Skip Johnson who said, they have a lot of older, experienced guys that have seen a ton of pitches and just been in a ton of college baseball games. And I think it's great that two of those guys are near the top of the lineup. They're kind of scattered throughout. You have Kane, who's a junior. Yeah, he's played a lot of baseball. And then you have Jackson, who's played actually so much baseball. So much baseball. He got an eligibility waiver to play more baseball. And he's played it at the JUCO level. And he's played on a UNC team that wasn't that good in 23. And then he watched a lot and had a big leadership role and came up big at the end in 24. And then you have Luke and Gavin, who are your stud sophomores. And then you go to Hunter, who also had to watch last year, but also played on that 23 team that just wasn't that good. And they played with a ton of guys. And I'll bring this up again. My favorite, I think, Hunter Stokely memory until it gets replaced is him hitting a walk-off at about 11 a.m. against Miami to then play a doubleheader game after a horrid rain delay / postponement, where I just ran back to my dorm completely soaked. But these two guys have just, I don't want to say unsung heroes because we have sung their praises, but they've showed up in big ways. And I think it just really says a lot to, not to like bring out too much of the coach speak, but the culture that this program has. All of these guys want to do one thing. They want to win, and they do it really well together. And I think that Jackson and Hunter are just really, and Jake too, they all represent guys who wanted to stay here. They want to help the younger guys. They want to win. And Jackson in particular, just because he is a captain, he's done so much of that. And you'll see sometimes, I don't know which game it is. Maybe it was with Luke and Jason during one of the Oklahoma games, the first one. But I think Luke came out to do a mound meeting. Maybe it was with Aiden. It was with one of the pitchers. None of the rest of the infield came in because it wasn't that type of mound meeting, except Jackson. He came in, he runs in maybe only for 10 seconds, says something to Aiden, gives him a slap, runs back out. And that's what he does. So I think both of those guys show up beyond just what you see in the stats, beyond where they are in the lineup. And Hunter does the same thing. He's played just fantastic defense at first. For someone where you look and you're like, oh, he plays baseball. Okay. He's been extremely dynamic, extremely athletic at first base. Some of the stretches he's got, the picks. And then the other day, I think Forbes' favorite moment from the Oklahoma game, when they showed him on the broadcast, he was just laughing it up. He had the biggest smile on his face is when Hunter had like a Yogi Berra or like it's a Willie Mays style bread basket catch in foul territory, just over the shoulder, kind of like Drake May was just dropping a pass right there and he got it, bringing up Drake. And so both of these guys have contributed. I mean, that's not going to show up in the stat sheet. Okay, great. He caught a foul out. So, but it's stuff like that that I think makes these two older guys so valuable as well.
Yeah, I think that was a huge play, and I said it in the box. I was like, that play right there will not get much airplay, but that was a big catch. I can't remember who hit it. I want to say it was Easton Carmichael.
It was Eastern Carmichael.
Yeah, and Carmichael was on a heater, so to get him out on a play like that, it's one of those plays, no free passes, no extra bases, and they got that play. Let's see. Walter Holtz burning up the chat. Coach Jackson back on staff. Wiersbicky deserve a ton of credit for helping this team not rely on the long ball. I agree. We've seen Hargett. We've seen all these guys come in, Carter French come in that can't bunt a lick and have at some point gotten bunts down in critical situations. We've seen guys that have relied on pulling the ball their entire life, learn to go opposite field and really open up their production at the plate. But Wiersbicky and Coach Jackson, 100%. We had Wiersbicky on this show a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. If you haven't listened to that one, go back and check it out. It was great. Also had Bryant Gaines on, and if you're listening, Coach Jackson, we need you on one of these as soon as possible as well. Let's see. Let's go through.
Hold on. Can I add something to
Jump in while I'm
question?
pulling another question.
I think that this entire coaching staff, and Forbes brings it up, does a really good job working together. And I think it was both with Sam. It was definitely with Sawyer during the FSU game. Coach Forbes asked Jackson, Weirs, who should we go to? And Jackson says, oh, Sawyer. Sawyer, who hadn't had an at-bat in so long because of a hamate injury. Sawyer goes up and he just hits one out of DeCaro Stadium. And the same thing with Angelo. That was definitely coach's decision of, hey, we're going to start Sam Angelo. And then he had 2 homers. So they work really well together, and not just are they helping guys on their hitting and their ability to hit the fastball. We've said that this is a big thing for this team. It's a really big advantage they have. They absolutely hammered Kyson Witherspoon. They hit really well off Jamie Arnold. Those are 2 really top shelf arms that the coaches had them completely prepared for. And that comes down to Weirs and Coach Jackson. So I think they do a really good job on that. And they also do a really good job on knowing the pulse of their hitters and when someone else should be hitting, what they should be hitting, if they should look up for the fastball, or maybe Tyson should watch for the cutter and he shouldn't go for ones down and away and stuff like that. So they work really well in that regard. And I think that's just showed up a lot in their results.
Yeah, and I think an important part, and we cover this team, we see a lot of it. I've never seen a coach praise his assistant coaches more than Coach Forbes does, and that speaks to Wiersbicky, that speaks to Jackson, Howell, and Gaines, and everybody really. He'll praise everybody. Terry Joe, Gatz, all the guys. I've seen a lot of coaches never take ownership of what happens on the field or on the court or on the football field, but I've never seen a coach like Forbes, defer to those guys. And to your point, the Sawyer Black deal. Sawyer Black never plays in that Florida State game if not for Coach Jackson saying this guy's ready, and we saw what he did. He hit a huge home run in a big ball game down there. Almost pushing an hour. I said we were going to get out of here earlier than we did last time. We were here an hour and 15 minutes last time. So we're getting out here earlier. 130 people in the chat. If everybody will click the like button, if everybody will go to Johnny T-shirt, we will have done our jobs tonight. Stephen Blakely asked, who has Arizona played this season? Stephen, I sort of rattled that off early in the year, but they've played some highly ranked teams. They played some teams that Carolina has played as well. So there's a lot going on there. This is a good Arizona ball club. West Coast teams don't really get the press, at least around here, that obviously local teams get, but Arizona's going to bring a good ball club in here. We just think North Carolina's probably got a little too much, but that's why they play the games. Preston, do we think Lynch starts a potential 3rd game? That is another huge question.
I think so. I think he should, but I'm not making the decisions. But Coach, if you're watching, you know a lot more than I do. I'm not one to argue with you, but I know it's already in your head because you have 15 billion plans, but this is just another idea. Maybe you can do that, and you can have Aiden go after Jason, or Aiden go after Ryan, or Ryan, Aiden, Walker, or I don't know. There's so many fun combinations. Throw a Seagraves in there, maybe an Olin for an inning. You never know. Very excited to see what happens. If that answers your question, Preston.
Obviously, the greatest plans are you play 2 games, you use 4 pitchers, and then you get everybody else simulated during the week as you head on to the next stop. But we'll see what happens. Grace, final thoughts before we get out of here.
I'm just very excited to watch some good baseball, especially a team that we haven't really seen before. I've actually never seen them. I say that I've never seen Oklahoma, and I loved that the UT and me absolutely loved that they lost. Yay. But I think seeing a different team from a different conference, from the Big 12, from the West Coast, is going to be great. I think Summerhill should be really fun to watch. I think it'll be a good one. It'll be fun, and I'm hoping for some really quality baseball. And I have no doubt that we're going to get really quality baseball at the Bosch. And I'm excited to see how the UNC pitching staff matches up to this Arizona offense and how it turns out. Last year, if you would have told me that they went down to the wire against West Virginia and 144 pitches, and then Vance comes in and goes, boo, homer. And just the at-bats between, I believe it was Sam White and Dalton Pence, and then Sam White dives for the bag, and then Dalton gets there first. I wouldn't have thought that was going to happen. So can't wait for whatever surprises, hopefully, this Super Regional has.
Yeah, it's baseball. You never know what's going to happen. Last question. We always close with Coach Forbes with a fun one. We're going to close with a fun one here. Matt Gaskell in the chat. Grace, what's your favorite Carolina jersey? And I have my list at the ready.
I really like the blue pinstripes, the Smurfs. I'm a big fan of the Smurfs. They also had one that they don't really wear this year, which is, I think, because it's not the full button down top, and it says Carolina in the block letters, and it's like the blue with the white pants. I also really like those, and you also can't go wrong with the white with the pinstripes. But I think Smurfs have to take it from me. Might as well take advantage of that Carolina blue. I do wish they did like a throwback navy jersey. As we can see, I love the color navy, but I haven't actually seen those in person.
Yeah, I'll go with the white pinstripes. I wish it said Carolina rather than Tar Heels. Obviously, the blue pinstripes say the Carolina. And then I agree with you. I like I think it's a 2-button, just simple Carolina blue with Carolina across it. They haven't worn that much as well.
No, I don't know why.
Yeah, and I do not like the white letters with the navy numbers on there.
I know. It's been working out, though. I think Jason likes them because he keeps pitching in them. So if he has any say, they won both of their – I think they won both their Oklahoma games in that one.
Yeah, so whatever works.
Paid off.
Yeah. That's why we talk about it, not play it, and not coach it. That's Grace Nugent. I'm Tommy Ashley. We listen to Inside Carolina, Inside the Lines. Shout out to all the people that have been in here. Shout out to everybody that's a part of getting this podcast posted and podcast live, and especially shout out to Johnny T-Shirt. We shall see you guys from Boshamer.